George Soros is a billionaire. He made his money by managing vast stock portfolios as a hedge fund manager and donated billions and billions of dollars to various left activist causes throughout his career. There are many conspiracy theories about him, some of which are demonstrably true, and some of which are not. And he's a character that is certainly a bugaboo of the right, especially the quacks on the right. And so he's somebody that I've been interested to do research on and figure out, where does he stand on a variety of issues? How does he assert himself as a politically dominant figure through employing his dollars and his influence? And so I've started to do some research into George Soros. And doing research into a guy like George Soros, or say the World Economic Forum, which is something that he has great influence in, is not something you can do rapidly if you want to do it well. And so you have to take it one issue at a time. And so the first, I read his whole Wikipedia page today, and that gave me a kind of a good overview of who he is, where he came from, how he made his money, and some of the things that he's done with his money. And I stumbled upon one really interesting thing about him, and this is actually a policy position that he took in 2010. This is a Wall Street Journal opinion piece. Why I support legal marijuana. We should invest in effective education rather than ineffective arrest and incarceration. So this is one aspect of George Soros here. I'd like to read you some of his opinions, because I think he's actually leading the charge here in a good way to in the fight that we saw eventually begin to legalize marijuana across the country. He made some of the most salient arguments that we've heard proponents of marijuana make for years now, but it's interesting to think that he was the source of many of these arguments. Okay, so let's read. Our marijuana laws are clearly doing more harm than good. Remember, this is 2010. The criminalization of marijuana did not prevent marijuana from becoming the most widely used illegal substance in the United States and many other countries, but it did result in extensive costs and negative consequences. Law enforcement agencies today spend billions of taxpayer dollars annually trying to enforce this unenforceable prohibition. The roughly 750,000 arrests they make each year for possession of small amounts of marijuana represent more than 40% of all drug arrests. Regulating and taxing marijuana would simultaneously save taxpayers billions of dollars in enforcement and incarceration costs, while providing many billions of dollars in revenue annually. It would reduce the crime, violence, and corruption associated with drug markets and the violations of civil liberties and human rights that occur when large numbers of otherwise law-abiding citizens are subject to arrest. Police could focus on serious crime instead. So I wanted to read this to you because I know that my audience, people who are drawn to my videos because I lean to the right, are probably people who also lean to the right and who are probably exposed to a lot of theories about guys like George Soros. And George Soros has done a lot of things, some of which I find to be extremely objectionable. But I'd like to point out this story to say, well, George Soros might do a lot of things that I don't agree with, one of which that is very much so on the record, so I don't feel bad about talking about, is the fact that he has funded dozens, maybe hundreds of district attorneys to take positions throughout the United States and not enforce laws. So what he's doing here is a very good thing. He's arguing against a law that he doesn't believe is good, and he's basically appealing to the people who then have appealed either to their legislators or have used the ballot in the form of referendums to change these laws. But what Soros has done with other laws that he doesn't like is basically pay for these district attorneys to not prosecute them, which really circumvents the Constitution, because the normal people who don't have billions of dollars put politicians in place to enact laws that they assume will be enforced. And these Soros-backed DAs are the reason that we see the crazy crime surge that we see right now, because there are a lot of municipalities throughout the United States in which you can commit violent crimes, you can commit robberies, you can vandalize businesses and know that you will not be prosecuted. However, I bring this story up because I certainly agree with Soros on this position. I even agree with him spending $400,000, I believe is what he spent in Massachusetts, to fight the fight to get marijuana legalized there. So my point here is that a guy like George Soros is nuanced. He has done many things with his many billions of dollars throughout his life, some of which are things that we certainly disagree with, some of which are things that need to be exposed to the public and talked about because they are things that, cause the streets of America to be more dangerous, because he doesn't encourage hardened criminals to be prosecuted and, in fact, pays. He's injected millions of dollars into these DA races, which previously would see tens of thousands of dollars put into the whole race, by buying up huge amounts of advertising to basically 100% guarantee that his selected candidate wins, which is an extremely dirty seeming thing to do to me. But when we look at a guy like George Soros, when we look at an organization like the World Economic Forum, we need to say George Soros is not the devil. We don't need to take like the Alex Jones approach, who, by the way, Alex is always trying to see what George Soros is putting in the weed, or at least that's what he tells Joe Rogan when he's trying to bum some of his marijuana. But we need to say, okay, George Soros is a human being. He's complicated. He does things that we like. He does things that we don't like. The World Economic Forum is an organization that might have a lot of policy goals that I find to be rather disturbing, but they also might do a lot of things that are beneficial to a lot of people that I agree with. So what I'm trying to say in breaking down this story is that we live in a complicated world. Things are not always black and white. They are frequently gray. And I will continue to highlight instances like this where people who you as a conservative, or me as a conservative, might be initially hesitant to give the time of day do something that I find to be admirable.